Welcome to So and So, brought to you by Bernina, made to create. I'm Meg Goodman, and you're about to enjoy a casual conversation with a special member of the sewist and quilting community. A conversation about how they got started, what inspires them, what excites them, and their connection to this community. Our guest today is Jennifer May Nickel, a member of the Costume Designers Guild, who lives in LA, but works her craft from wherever she's called in places such as Atlanta, New York, Chicago, Phoenix, Lafayette, Louisiana, and Pittsburgh. Born and raised in Pittsburgh, she completed her undergrad studies at East Stroudsburg University. She did summer studies at St. Edmund's College of Oxford University and earned her MFA in costume design at Carnegie Mellon. Her TV costume design credits include work on Gotham Knights and Legacies, as well as many others. She's worked on numerous films and commercials for many large, well-known companies, and she's won the Elizabeth Schrader Kimberly Costume Design Award, the Cecilia Cohen Award for Excellence in Theater, and the WCDAC Achievement Award. She loves to travel the world, collecting fabric and vintage clothing along the way. Jennifer currently resides in Los Angeles with her husband, John Paul Nickel. Hi, Jen, and welcome to So and So.
Hi, Meg. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
We are thrilled that you agreed to join us. And as we were talking before we started recording and in doing research and learning about you, I learned many cool things that we're about to share with our listeners. So I want to jump right in because we have a lot to talk about today. First of all, how'd you learn to sew?
I learned to sew in a multitude of different ways, hilariously. I first learned to sew as a child, but only by hand. And it is because I found my great-grandmother's sewing kit. And I just dug into it and I looked around at the projects that she had started, God knows when, um, and looked at her construction of things. And I found her button collection. And so I started sewing buttons onto fabric and sewing little embroidery patterns into fabric as a kid. And, I feel that there are a lot of people out there who may have made clothes for their Barbie dolls when they were little, and I was definitely one of those people.
Mm-hmm.
And later in life, my mom kept trying to get me to learn how to sew on a sewing machine, and I was extremely resistant to it to the point where I designed my prom dress, but she made it for me because I was so resistant to the sewing machine. I think it just scared me. And and I was very lucky and fortunate that she made my prom dress for me, knowing now what all of that takes. I'm like, wow, that was wonderful of my mom. I'm very time consuming. And I still have it, obviously, to this day. And I actually use it on TV shows now, too. So I'll take a photo of it and send it to her and say, see, Mom, it's still, all your hard work is still paying off.
That's pretty special.
Yeah. But when I was in undergrad was when I finally learned how to use the sewing machine because of many different things. But Bernina, the 1008 was the first one I learned how to technically sew on, which was exciting.
Do you remember the first thing you made?
I wish I did.
Okay.
It was probably one of those little samplers that they make students do, but I didn't have a traditional sewing class. I took to the sewing machine. A professor showed me how to thread it, and that was about it. In undergrad, we did not have a costume program at the school I went to, and it was a learn as you go and teach yourself kind of thing. A few months after I started sewing and designing costumes, they brought in a professor who then formally helped to teach me or re-instruct what I'd been doing wrong all those past months.
So they retaught you. I see.
Yes. And then there was reteaching there, and then going to grad school, more reteaching also on Berninas. And and we learn as we go throughout life new techniques. I feel that I will never be done learning how to sew, and because there's always new tips and tricks to learn along the way and ways to increase your skills.
You've kind of sprinkled in a little bit here about hand sewing and evolving to machine sewing. Now, what I think is interesting is that you've said you were always a theater kid who thought you'd go into acting and directing, but a professor saw your costume sketches and encouraged you to give designing a try, and boop, you fell in love with the craft. So what was it about designing that filled you up? And, you were designing Barbie clothes as a kid, but you never thought about doing that.
Yeah, my parents have pictures that I drew as soon as I could hold a crayon, and it was always of clothes. I was always doing clothing sketches, doodles. The professor that noticed my sketches, it was during one of my theater classes, and they noticed all of the designs on the side of the notebook page, in addition to all my notes in the class. And they had seen some of my paintings from art class, and they were like, and you should think about trying costume design. And it was something that I didn't even just realize was a career opportunity until that person told me it was. I knew there were opportunities as a fashion designer, but that end of things seemed a bit too far out of my reach. And something that, while I love fashion, what I really love is storytelling through costumes. And seeing movies like Little Women or Gone with the Wind when I was younger, I was always in awe of the costumes, and I could see the story that was trying to be told just through the clothing, and in addition to the actor. And I always loved that. And it just somehow hadn't dawned on me as an option in life, as a career. And so the professor encouraged me to do it, and I fell in love. And I quickly realized that I would rather be up until 4 o'clock in the morning making a costume instead of up until 4 o'clock in the morning learning my lines for a play. So it was a very clear and quick transition for me, because as soon as I tried it, it truly was that love at first sight, kismet, like, kind of moment where I saw my career as a costume designer from across the room, and and it was love, and we could never break up after that. So it just was full speed ahead in that direction as soon as I found it. And it truly was like, where have you been my whole life?
So I have to ask, the professor that encouraged you to do this, are they aware of where you have gone with your career because of that discovery they made?
Yes, they are. I am the person who definitely has kept in touch with my previous professors. I'm a bit of a school nerd in that way in this school, but I also am so grateful for them taking that opportunity to go, I think this might be something you want to look at, because without that, I have no idea what I would be doing in life right now. I would hope that I would have found this path eventually, but I'm just really very grateful that they saw it within me, the thing that I didn't see myself, and that they saw my potential and that they helped to foster it.
You were talking earlier about finding your grandma's sewing kit, sewing as a kid, making clothes for your Barbies. Tell us more about what you were like when you were a younger child.
I was very precocious, is what my parents would say. I was constantly experimenting and tinkering, and I would always have just weird things going on around the house. I was an only child, and my family would joke, don't just open the fridge or freezer because Jen's got an experiment going on in there. I loved science, and before I went into the world of theater, film, and television, I thought I was actually going to be an obstetrician gynecologist, which couldn't be further from what I do today. But I I love science. I love figuring out the mechanics of how things work, or why if you put a product in a petri dish in one way and set it in a specific environment, what grows from there, and all of those funky little things. And so I'd have paintings in progress. I'd have experiments in progress. I didn't realize it when I was young, but I was technically making my own dye mixes a lot, but it was like with leaves and mud and different things, and seeing what it would do to some of the fabrics. And I mean, it truly was, I was always meant to do this, but just in a very, childlike, wondrous, naive way.
So it seems like that penchant you had for tinkering and your curiosity were really some of the traits you needed to be a costume designer.
Yes, it came definitely in handy. I'm the kind of person who loves to just research everything, probably more than I even need to research it. I will go down the rabbit hole for hours, learning every in and out as much as possible for every little thing that I'm trying out. So, and I'm always looking to learn new skills. Yeah, like this past year, I've taken to custom making shoes.
Oh my.
Yes, but it's been a good way to, buff up my leather skills. But it's also a new and different kind of construction that I really, really enjoy, and something that I'd always wanted to try.
You can add that to your list of accomplishments. We're going to talk a little bit later in our conversation about the process of designing costumes for TV. But one thing I want to make sure that we don't miss talking about is the fact that you moved to LA during the writer's strike, which taught you quite a bit and prepared you for COVID. And you also learned that your industry can be feast or famine. And I think this is
Yes.
interesting coming from someone who is, all of us on the outside hear this, but you lived it. So would you tell us about these times and how you survived and, more about what you learned?
So it was terrifying to basically, my husband and I, we were engaged at the time. We packed up each of our cars, only took what we could fit in our cars, and moved to Los Angeles when there was absolutely no work to be had. But
Mhm.
we knew we needed to get out here sooner than later, and at least if we went out when we did, we would have the time to get ourselves settled in and start to network and meet people, make friends, like start, our lives out here basically before work started going. And it we cobbled together our jobs. We each between us, we had like 6 or 7 jobs going at a time just to make ends meet in different ways. And that taught me just how much fortitude each of us has, and
Mhm.
just how much we want this for our lives and want this as our careers. And that moving out when we did definitely proved that we're in this for the long haul, because most people don't make it through those kind of times. And we just stuck in, we gritted our teeth. And there are still days where I forget that I can just put things in the recycling bin, and that's okay. I don't have to go to the recycling center, have them count out every bottle and can to get the rebate. And so
Mhm.
it's to me having very, very humble beginnings with not many means and knowing how to take a few pennies and make things work and last, and having that fortitude of being able to work in a few different landscapes, but still in the same realm. And I learned that I just am very stubborn and I will not give up on things that I love and care about, which is my career. So and it took a long time for Hollywood to come back from it. This time around with the writers and actors strike, it's taking even longer for Hollywood to come back. But I've gone back to my little toolbox of, okay, well, don't want to do what I did last time necessarily, but I know that I have the ability to kind of diversify my income right now in different ways. So, yeah.
So you went out to Los Angeles at one of the worst possible times. There was no work. How does one become a costume designer for TV shows, films, commercials? How does that work?
Hilariously, for when I came out, because there weren't many paying jobs, but I wanted to get my foot in the door and get experience. A now very close friend that I had just met and was an acquaintance at the time said, well, I can't hire you, but if you want to come and intern, you can. And I thought that, oh, great. I just graduated from grad school. That'll totally count. And no, I had to then go pay for the Glendale Community College internship program.
Oh, my.
Which was, hilarious when you think about that. Okay, I just went through all of grad school and I will have student loans that I have to start paying in 6 months that are, luckily I had some scholarships, but still terrifying in that financial time. And there I am going and paying to be an intern. But it's, you do what is necessary when you want this as your career. And I did. And I learned so much because while I'd worked on a lot of TV and movies in Pittsburgh, it is a different experience out here. And so I was able to learn a lot in a less pressure situation since I was the intern. I still had a lot of responsibilities, but at the same time, it was nothing like what I would then be going on to do. And in our business, there is a hierarchy that you just work up. Like you don't graduate from grad school with your MFA in costume design and just go costume design film or TV. You'll get some indie projects that you get to design. You get to design theater, student film, short films. There's a lot of little things that you get, but no one is just going to hand you a network television show right out of school and say, okay, here you go do that. You start out as a production assistant in a costume department usually. And it's, getting everyone coffee, their lunch, you're doing runs around the town. You're making photocopies of this, that, and the other thing. You're making sure that supplies are being bought. And there's all these different little jobs that you're kind of that silent and quiet backbone of the department that you make sure the trains run on time. But your work isn't necessarily work of costumes. It's more the technical side of things, of making sure there's enough safety pins in the fitting room and tags, and things of that nature that just keep everything running smoothly, and anticipating the needs of the designer and supervisor and assistant costume designer ahead of you start there, and then you just slowly start to work your way up through the department. A lot of people then become background costumers, which is all of the background actors that you see in shows and movies. They all need someone to put the clothes on them and make sure they look good, and are making all of the costumes in the vision that the costume designer wants. Because the costume designer on a large show, they don't have the time to go through each and every single person. We'll build a costume board of saying, this is what I want the look to be for these people, pull a few racks of clothing from various resources, and I'll come take a look and see if I like everything. If I do, then the background costumers put the clothes on the people and make sure they look great and ready for camera. So then you usually move up to those steps. Sometimes you become a shopper, and basically you run around all over town and all over the internet finding the crazy things that I think up and go, hey, why don't we do this, that, and the other? And can you find me this wackadoo fabric that it's technically, I got it in New York City 25 years ago, but see if there's something similar. And hilariously, in Atlanta, there is a fabric store that does have quite a lot of fabrics that I used back in my theater days. Anytime I go in there, I'm like, oh, that's where that came after I used it. Yay, it's nice to see you again, old friend. So, and then you just keep slowly working up. I was fortunate enough that when I moved out here, because of the strike, there were actually a lot more smaller projects going. They didn't pay at all, but I at least got experience, and I was able to grow my network and meet a lot of people, so that when more work was happening, I was getting recommended to do bigger projects and move on to fully designing on my own. So I was only PAing for a short amount of time, like 2 years, which is, a good amount to get your feet wet and know how a department runs before moving too fast. But then after that, I was assistant costume designing and designing on my own.
And now you are the person that those PAs run those errands for.
Yes.
Oh, I heard the relief in your voice. Now,
yes.
I want to learn about this. One of your favorite projects that you've talked about allowed you to, and I'm going to quote you here, flex your down and dirty post-apocalyptic design skills. I'm fascinated. What exactly is that, and why do you like it so much?
So in our world, we have agers and dyers and distressing artists. And often, depending on the production, it can be a whole department within and of itself on a show. Like The Walking Dead, they have a whole entire costume distressing, aging, dying team. But it is one aspect of the job that I just love so much. I think it's that part of me that loves to tear things apart and see how they work. But I love to just bring the grit and grime and tears and everything to costumes that maybe before were pristine, and bring them into a grungy place that works for what we're supposed to be doing. On Gotham Knights, we had the Mutant Gang, which is originally from the 1980s, and they're very punk. And while we wanted to pay a lot of homage to the original Mutant Gang from the comics, we also wanted to make sure they worked in the setting of Gotham that we had going. And so while they're definitely punk, they're also grungy in the way of they've been living in the sewers and the tunnel networks in Gotham. And so they're not They're not pristine. They do illegal substances, and so they have some interesting ways of reflecting that in their clothing. And it it was really fun to. I basically hodgepodged a lot of their looks together and from old costumes that we had in our stock from like Vampire Diaries, the originals, and Legacies.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would show my team, like, okay, like take the back off this, but put it on the shoulder over here, and then take some spray paint cans and take the basically the barbecue brushes, the wire brushes that people use to clean their barbecues. We use those so much to make the costumes look frayed and worn in and break down the material. And we'll make our own mixtures of fake mud and using dye mixtures to make things look like they've been worn for 20 years straight when they're brand new. And to me, there's an art and process in making things look dingy and gross and post-apocalyptic. Um, it's fun to get to play with fake blood and goop. And I designed a TV show called Containment that it was before COVID, but I felt that when COVID happened, we were definitely ahead of our time on that one because everyone had to wear masks and stay 6 feet apart, and it was the virus on our show was definitely way more deadly than COVID was. It was one of those, if you get it, you'll die within 48 hours, and it's very gruesome. So I got to have a lot of fun in that down and dirty department. And I love teaching that kind of stuff to my crew. If they haven't had the experience of having to work in a post-apocalyptic show before, it's like, okay, well, here we go. We're going to train you in blood. We're going to train you in dirt and grime and all the fun things. And on Gotham Knights, one of our characters had to have some mud on their shoes at one point, and my crew had never had like put together some fake mud. And I was like, all right, get me a Kind bar or a Cliff bar, or whatever, one of those bars. If we got some peanut butter around, and I always make sure that no one has a nut allergy also. Before I do any of that, because I just like to say the safety end of things. Don't go making fake mud if you don't know if someone has a nut allergy. But it's the things that you can mix together with a little bit of sand, a little bit of peanut butter, a little bit of the tar and whatnot, and it looks just like real mud, but it's a bit more hygienic than real mud. So, and it'll actually stay on the shoe instead of flake off all over the set. So it's one of those just fun little things that I love anytime I get to basically play in the dirt.
You know, I'm never going to look at those foods the same again now. Think of mud. So this is fascinating, and you're very in the weeds and granular, which is what you love to do about this specific genre of design. Can you zoom out a little bit and take us through the overall process of designing costumes for a TV show?
So it's a big process, but for me, a wonderful one. I don't love anything else except my husband more. It starts really. I would say the costume design process starts before you even know about it, because being married to a writer, I get to see all of the stuff that happens before the costume designer is even brought on board. And it's the writers and producers really starting to hone and craft a story and what the general energy of each character is, where they come from, what is their socioeconomic status, what have they been through in their life up until the point of this script. Basically, all of those little details of who they are and where they come from and why they put those clothes on every single morning and what their character story is. And then by the time I get the script to read and put together what I call costume boards, what the industry calls costume boards, um, by the time I get that, they have already had conversations about what the tone of the show is, what color palettes they want to see on screen, what it, are the sets pristine and glittering, are they Art Deco, are they modern, are all of those little architectural details then help to inform the costumes as well. And so before I'm even brought on, they have conversations with each other, figuring out the general gist of it. And then I get the script. Usually I'll have a quick chat with someone involved in the production before I have the interview with everybody, just to get a general sense of what those conversations were before I was being involved in them, so that I know what direction they're hoping to go in. Sometimes they don't know what direction they want to go in, and sometimes they have a very clear and concise idea. And so I like to, pitch into what I can where they know they want to go. And I'll start making inspiration boards. Long before Pinterest existed, this is what costume designers all over the world were doing for directors and writers and producers for theater and film and television, just making boards upon boards upon boards of images of research and inspiration and seeing what clicked. What I did, at least for Gotham Knights, was some things you can't always find an image of. And so depending on the project, I'll often draw my ideas out as costume illustrations for the interview. When I just have an idea in my head that I love and I need to get it out of my system and onto the page and show it for the interview. And I drew both Duella and Carrie, who plays Robin. I drew costumes out for them for the interview, and that is what helped get the job. And so that's just the very beginning. And then I got the job. And then you start to have conversations with the showrunners and honing in on all of the different looks for each person, things that they might want to change, things that just mulling over different ideas and brainstorming together. And I was very fortunate that I was very much on the same visual page as the showrunners for Gotham Knights. Chad and James knew what they wanted, and often I already had thought of the same thing before they said it out loud and was sending them a photo of something that inspired me, and they had already been thinking about it. So it was really wonderful to be on that same wavelength with them. It's not always what happens for every designer on every show, but when you get that, it's lightning in a bottle, and it's so wonderful and refreshing. And from there, you're kind of building the look of the show and making sure all of the characters play well together on screen visually. And then the actors come into the process and you're meeting them for the first time after a lot of other conversations have already taken place. But they're the ones wearing the costumes. So inevitably, they do and should have opinions about all of it. And what's wonderful is bringing the extra voice in and hearing a new perspective and going, oh, that is brilliant. I didn't think of that. Let's go in that direction. Because everything that another person brings in is just one more way of rounding out the character. And it's fun when you finally get it all together. I love the process of fittings because it's it's an electric moment when you've been working on a costume for either days or weeks, depending on the costume. And the actor puts it on, and there is this moment of transformation where they become their character in that moment. And
Hmm.
it is what I love about fitting so much is seeing that transformation happen. And that's how at least for me, I know we have found the right costume for that character. They are embodying that person now. And oftentimes it's just finding the right combination of items in a different way, like finding that right shoe or just that perfect sock that even though no one in the audience may ever see that sock detail, that actor does. And when they put the sock on and then they put their shoe on, they're embodying that character. And so finding all of those little details that don't make it on screen, but inform who this character is and what they're going through is really what I absolutely love about costume design.
So you work toward that special moment.
Hmm. Yes.
So
And
to give us an idea of the complexity of this, what's the duration from the minute things start to that moment where you do the fittings?
so uh, I'll say for Gotham Knights, I hilariously was hired on June 6th, my birthday. So it was the best birthday gift ever. And it, I had really started, it was about 2.5 weeks earlier on the process of getting ready for the interview, building the board. So really, it started then for me. And then, so mid May, then throughout the summer, I was working on research images and pulling ideas and just getting down into the weeds of all of it, rereading some of the comics that I love from Batman that the showrunners were also highlighting for the show, which, I mean, what a joy. It's like, oh, darn, I have to read some of my favorite comics again for work and twist my arm. And so that process was going through June and July, having quick little meetings with them here and there to go over thoughts, ideas as everything evolved. And then August of that year was when I really started. I started full time on the show in Atlanta, going through prep when, drawing everything out, finding the right fabrics, going through all of the approval processes. And then the fittings, they didn't even start happening until the end of August. And then we started filming 2 weeks after that. So from mid May to mid September was the beginnings of it.
Hmm.
And that is about normal for a first year show. Sometimes it'll be an even longer prep process for bigger shows like Game of Thrones or Gilded Age. Anything that has an even larger cast with more custom made clothing, it will be even more intense of a prep process. But for a show of our kind where it was about half custom made, half retooling
Hmm.
things that existed. Uh, yeah, that's about average. And then the filming process, what we do for a TV show that's an hour long is you'll film each episode over 6 to 10 days on an average show. Again, something like Game of Thrones is a very different. It's a different beast all of its own, and they have an entirely different process. But the average show that you're going to watch on network television has 6 to 10 days to film an hour long episode, and then if it's a half-hour show, you get 4 to 6 days, depending on if it's a single camera, multi-camera. There's all the different processes. um, but our show was a very tight one in that by the end of it, we were doubling up on episodes where we would have 2 episodes filming in 2 different locations on the same day. And it was where I wish that I could have cloned myself because
Mm-hmm.
I had to be in 2 places at once, but it is physically impossible. So, um, and then some shows will run depending on how many episodes they get per season. Some shows will go for a year, sometimes 2, like Stranger Things, with having such a young cast, they would film for 2 years straight sometimes and then take some time off here and there or have mini hiatuses in between seasons where they just take 2 to 3 weeks off so everyone can get a little bit of rest before going right back at it again. So it always depends on the show. And especially now with streaming, it's a whole different kind of model in our business. Usually before it would be, okay, the show will start in June to prep. You'll start filming in July. And then by March, you'll be done with the first season. And now it's kind of anything goes. You
Mm-hmm.
could be filming at any time of the year and hopping on to the next project afterwards. Did that answer it?
Oh my gosh.
Okay.
It just I feel like I'm living your life with you when you talk about this. And this is such amazing behind the scenes stories for us. What's the best thing about what you do?
I think it's that moment in the fitting when everything comes together
Mm-hmm.
and you're seeing that character come to life. Um, for me, that's the best feeling and the best moment. I I love being able to help tell a character's story arc over a season. I love television so much because you can, if you're lucky enough to have multiple seasons, you can tell a character's story over so much time and you can see their transformation in the clothes that they wear. And I love that I get to be a part of that. And I love that I can help tell that story in a psychological way, but through clothing.
And what's the hardest thing about what you do?
I would definitely say uh, time.
Mm-hmm. And the inability to clone yourself.
Yes, yeah, because you know, while I love filming on location because I get to go to some of the coolest places at the most interesting times that a regular person will never get to see that side of a place. Like I've filmed at O'Hare Airport in Chicago at 3 o'clock in the morning
Mm.
before, and it, no one else is really going to get to experience that, not being in our business. There's so many locations that you get to go to that are these historical old homes that only the homeowner gets to see that and their friends and family. And yet you're there getting to appreciate the architecture and experience all of the little things that it's, I get to go to so many places in the world because of my job that it is a blessing in that way, but at the same time a curse because I'm away from my husband. Really, I often work 18-hour days on a lot of productions, which is insane. Um, and I don't get to sleep a lot. But there's truly nothing I would rather do. And so while I wish I had a bit more time in life so that I could sleep and rest and have a brain that functions, I also wouldn't trade it for anything else. And it is something that I tell people who are thinking they might want to go into costume design. Like, look, if there is something that you love more than costume design, you should do that because it's a hard business. It's hard to get into. It's hard to work your way up. Sadly, costume designers do not experience the same pay equity as other department heads in our industry do. You know, while every department has a diverse crew, the costume department tends to have more females in the department than many others. And categorically and historically, we are very underpaid because of that. And so it's been a fight with the studios to get pay equity, to be on par with the production designers and the directors of photography and everything. It's been a fight for us to try to get paid better than craft services, which are the people who give us the snacks throughout the day on set.
They're some of my favorite people.
They're wonderful people, but they often get paid more than I do. And so it's one of those things where if you love it the way I love it, if you can't imagine yourself doing anything else, if you can stick out the current strike situation going on in basically all over the country, anywhere that films, if you can get through all of that, then this obviously is what you should be doing with your life. And, you'll find a way to make it work. But if you don't love it, there are easier jobs out there. And so, like craft services.
The snack hander-outers, I like that.
And they do work hard too. So I don't want to belittle any of that. But they definitely have they get to have a work-life balance more than a lot of costume departments do. So it's one of those things that just I like to encourage people coming up, like know what your options are. And everyone thinks of it as a very glamorous department to be in, but we are the first line of defense, and we're the first ones in, the last ones out. And some people aren't, you don't realize the things that we have to take care of, which comes down to people's underwear. And so just use your imagination in all the ways that could, play out in a person's day. And it is our job to take care of those situations. So it is not as glamorous as people like to think it is. But like I said, there's nothing I love more. And so if you love to sew, if you love costumes, if you love being able to help to tell a story and that story ends up on screen, then costume design might be for you.
So the fire you have for this is so obvious. What are some of your current projects, and where can we look for your designs?
So currently, because of the strike situation, I don't have a full-on show at the moment. Hopefully that will change soon. But I have been doing a variety of different costume things at the moment. I work with comedian Bert Kreischer, and he has some very exciting things coming up soon that I'm not quite privy to tell yet, but hopefully you'll see them on some billboards around the country soon.
Okay.
And on Netflix as well. I can say at least that much.
Okay.
So there's some fun things coming out there. I've worked on some fun WrestleMania costumes that will be seen in a few short weeks on pay-per-view. And I've been styling some of my friends who are actors and showrunners and writers and such. So doing fun little things like that and custom making shoes and doing just fun little pieces to sell for the fans of different shows that I've worked on.
So we know what you're doing now. So let me ask, what's next for you? And then what's your dream?
So next, a few fun things that are coming up is first is Comic-Con towards the end of July. I'm very excited to be working with Burnett for that. I'm going to have a panel with a few other people from the costume department, as well as a few cosplayers, about how to take a costume that you see on screen, how to translate it into cosplay in a cost efficient and accurate way. Because a lot of cosplayers will spend months and months and months creating these beautiful costumes that for us costume designers, it's one of the most joyful things for us to see. It's very flattering for someone to recreate your art. And we always just want to help someone, like, how to translate what we did. This is the materials we use. This is how we do it. This is we only had 3 days to make this and get it on screen. So you shouldn't have to spend months killing yourself trying to recreate this. Here's a good way of doing this with your leather, and you don't need to use foam here, or different ways to use your Burnett or Bernina to help the process go a lot faster, which is, thank God, a godsend in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm very excited to be doing that panel. And then for the second year in a row, Bernina and Burnett have been gracious enough to help sponsor an award for the Comic-Con Masquerade that is in memory of my dear friend, Oksana, who passed away a year ago, tragically. And she was a dear friend of mine who also was one of my tailors and could beautifully bring together my illustrations in just a matter of days. And we would put a costume on an actor for the very first time and often have not a single alteration needed to be made, because her work was just brilliant. And she was just one of the most amazing people that you could ever meet, full of life and light and love. And I'm very thankful that Bernina and Burnett are helping to sponsor the award in her honor. And that award is going to go to the person with the most excellence and craftsmanship, because her tailoring and her embroidery, her stitching, every little thing she did was just beautiful. And so I'm happy that I'm able to give an award in her honor in the same way of what she did, and help encourage others to continue that in their lives.
Some special things ahead of you. What's your dream?
What is my dream? My dream is, so my husband is a TV writer, and the two of us, we like to work together on projects when we can. It doesn't get to happen very often, but when we do get to work together, it is magic. And so our dream is to create a show together that we can, be the showrunners, but I'm on the creative visual side of it, and he is, more the writing, acting, directing side of it. It's basically, if anyone's ever watched Battlestar Galactica or Outlander.
Mm-hmm.
Ronald D. Moore and his wife, Terry Dreisbach, she's the costume designer and he's the showrunner. And that it is our dream basically to be them, or like Baz Luhrmann and Catherine Martin. That's what we want for our lives.
And we're going to look forward to seeing that. Knowing you and your tenacity, it's just a matter of time. So, Jen, in everything we've talked about today, is there a question I didn't ask you that you wish I had?
Oh, can I touch really quickly on traveling and collecting fabric and clothes?
Oh, yes, please.
So anytime I am not working, I am trying to just travel as much as humanly possible. It is part of that wanting to learn how everything works tenacity and wanting to see everything. And what I love most about traveling is when I get to go fabric shopping or vintage clothing shopping in different places. It's a dangerous hobby that often my husband is like, remember, we're only packing a carry-on. So that does help. It does help. What becomes dangerous is when I find a place that's like, oh, don't worry, we'll ship it back to you really cheap.
Oh, no.
Yeah. And so that is where I get into trouble. And I have bins and bins and bins of vintage clothes and different fabrics. But, they do get used eventually on my shows. So, but I found in England a few months ago this vintage Fiat coverall, which I am obsessed with. I need to tailor it to fit me, but I wear a lot of coveralls for work because of how dirty I often get.
Making mud, right?
Yes, exactly. Between all the dyes and the peanuts and everything going on, I get very dirty at work, so I don't want to wear anything too nice, but still look presentable and, decent. And so coveralls are often a cute but utilitarian way for me to do that. And I found an amazing vintage Fiat coverall that has it has like lightning bolts on it, and so it's really interesting. And I was also able to go to India, where I got just some amazing raw silks that I have lots of plans for, but who knows when I'll actually get to make anything out of them. But I was also able to find some vintage jewelry that I absolutely fell in love with there. A store had a necklace made entirely out of nickels. And
perfect.
Since my last name is Nickel, I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have this. And it was just this amazing piece of art that, off in India finding, and it's one of the things that I love about travel is like, you never know what you're going to experience and what you're going to find. And it's just this whole entire planet is a treasure trove if we only just look at it like that.
One of our favorite things to do on this podcast is to reconnect with some of our guests down the road and see what they've been up to since our previous conversation. And we're absolutely going to slate you in for that. There's a lot ahead of you, Jen. It's been great to talk to you today. I'm so glad you joined us, and I know our listeners are going to want to reach out to you. What's the best way for them to do that?
I would say find me on Instagram and message me there. I'm Jennifer May Designs on Instagram. And if you're on Twitter instead, I'm at JMN Designs on Twitter.
All right. That's wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing your story and a lot of insider looks with us today. It's been wonderful.
Thank you so much, Meg, for having me. It's been fun chatting.
And there you have it. Another story about a very special someone who dedicated their life's work to where they are today. Someone for whom sewing and quilting is so much more than a hobby. It's a way of life and a connection to something bigger. If you know someone you think has an outstanding story, a story that should be shared on this podcast, please drop me a note to meg@sewandsewpodcast.com or complete the form on our website. Be sure to subscribe to, rate, and review this podcast on your favorite platform, and visit our website, sewandsewpodcast.com, for more information about today's and all of our guests. That's SEWANDSO podcast.com. And finally, I want to thank Bernina for making this program possible. I'm Meg Goodman, and I look forward to you joining us next time on So and So.